With steady steps but a troubled heart, Yin entered the classroom. The noisy atmosphere did nothing to dispel the storm in her mind. She sat in her usual seat, but not a single word from the lecturer made its way into her thoughts. Her notebook lay open, but the pages remained blank. Her eyes stared straight ahead, but her mind was busy replaying the incident in the corridor. Why did Mona have to become a new lecturer at this campus? Why now? The uneasiness in her chest grew heavier. Her instincts, rarely wrong, told her that Mona hadn't come to this campus just to teach. Her purpose must be something more. Yin glanced at the watch on her wrist. 5 more minutes until break time. She knew Jungkook didn't have any morning classes today, and the urge to confirm her gut feeling made her rise as soon as the bell rang. Without telling anyone, she slipped out of the classroom and hurried toward the faculty building, where Jungkook's office was located. Without knocking, Yin pushed open the door and walked into Jungkook's office. The door hadn't been locked. Jungkook, who was organizing a stack of papers on his desk, turned around. His eyes widened slightly, surprised. "Yin," he said, shifting his gaze directly to his wife. "This is unexpected. What's going on?" Yin's face looked anxious, her troubled expression impossible to hide. "You already know about Mona?" she asked without preamble. Jungkook frowned. "Know what?" "She's starting as a lecturer at this campus today." Jungkook paused for a moment, then shook his head. "Seriously?" he asked. "This is the first I'm hearing of it from you. I haven't seen her at all this morning." Yin inhaled deeply, then slowly exhaled. She walked carefully toward Jungkook's desk and stood in front of him. "I saw her this morning, in the corridor with Hannah, and for some reason, I just feel uneasy." "Jungkook." She looked deeply into her husband's eyes. "I'm scared. I'm sure she has another reason for coming here." Seeing how anxious his wife was, Jungkook told Yin to come closer, and she obeyed, stepping up to his chair. He took a deep breath, then reached out and held her hand tightly. "Listen," he said gently, "even if she really came here to get close to me again, it won't mean anything if I don't give her the space to. But still, I can't stay calm." Yin replied in a low voice. "It's not because I don't trust you. It's because I know her. She isn't the type to give up easily. She'll find a way." Jungkook softly caressed her hand, looking at her with firm yet loving eyes. "This is all just speculation for now, Yin. We don't know her true intentions yet. Maybe she really needs the job. Maybe this is all just a coincidence." But before his words could fully ease Yin's worries, they both heard a sound outside the door. A faint laugh, soft, delicate, and unmistakably familiar. Mona's voice, along with Hannah's. Jungkook immediately glanced at the door, then turned back to Yin. Without a word, he pulled her closer, and in a swift motion, Yin found herself seated on Jungkook's lap. "Hey, Jungkook," Yin gasped, surprised. But before she could finish her protest, Jungkook cupped her face and kissed her on the lips, gentle but firm. And right at that moment, click, the door, which had never been fully closed, slowly swung open. Standing at the doorway were Hannah and Mona. Mona's eyes widened, frozen in place as she took in the sight before her. Jungkook, kissing the lips of a female student who now sat on his lap. But more than that, what made her face stiffen was the fact that the student was Yin, his wife. Hannah held her breath, clearly not expecting they'd walk in at such a moment. But unlike Mona, a faint smile curved at the corner of her lips. Yin, now aware of the two women's presence, quickly pulled away from Jungkook. Her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with the anger burning hotter upon seeing Mona. Jungkook, however, remained calm. He glanced toward Mona and spoke in a low but clearly audible voice. "If you want to come in, knock first." Mona's gaze stiffened, but before she could respond, Jungkook added another line, sharp, like a knife slicing exactly where it hurts. "Wouldn't want you to walk in on something even hotter than this." The contrast in their reactions to what they had just witnessed was striking. Hannah let out a soft laugh, playfully teasing, "Wow, someone forgot this is an office. Hold it in, Mr. Jungkook. Save it for home, okay?" Meanwhile, Mona stood frozen, her face attempting a polite smile, but her eyes couldn't hide the shock and tightly held rage. With light steps, Hannah entered the room, followed by Mona, who was still trying to neutralize her expression. Yin quickly stood up from Jungkook's lap, smoothing her skirt with a small motion, showing not the slightest hint of shame. She stood beside Jungkook, right next to his desk chair. Jungkook leaned back in his seat casually, unfazed, neither guilty nor awkward, calm and cool, his gaze sharp but expression blank as his eyes met Mona's. "Starting today, Mona is officially a lecturer on this campus," Hannah explained lightly, trying to ease the tension that clearly filled the room. "That's why we stopped by to say hi to the department head." Mona smiled, adding in a soft, clearly feigned tone, yes, and when I found out you were teaching here, it felt so nostalgic. Reminded me of our college days, Jungkook. We used to be very close, remember? She emphasized that line while glancing briefly at Yin, trying to see if the girl would show any reaction. But Yin remained calm, standing gracefully by her husband's side, her gaze steady, completely unfazed by Mona's words. But Jungkook's reaction was clearly not what Mona had hoped for. Nostalgia? He said quietly, flatly. I don't recall anything worth remembering from college, especially not about us being close. Instantly, the atmosphere grew colder. Hannah let out a quiet chuckle, trying to mask the rising tension. But Mona didn't give up. She kept talking, trying to remind Jungkook of college memories, group projects, campus events, and so on. But Jungkook's attention was no longer on them. Because while Mona was still speaking, Jungkook turned to Yin and gently touched her wrist. You haven't told me what you want for lunch today? Or should we just eat out together? He asked softly. Yin looked at him, smiling sweetly. I brought lunch, Jungkook. Let's just eat here. I'll make you some tea too. Jungkook gave a small nod, his expression softening, as if Yin were the only person in the room. Their conversation flowed with a tender, familiar warmth. The voice that had earlier sounded cold and firm was now soft and caring, reserved only for his wife. Hannah and Mona exchanged glances. Their presence suddenly felt meaningless. Hannah sighed and raised an eyebrow slightly, as if realizing something. She understood. This wasn't the right moment to drop by. With Yin here, it was obvious that Jungkook's attention was solely on his wife. Meanwhile, Mona stood beside Hannah, biting her lower lip, frustrated, disappointed, yet still trying to keep her pride intact. Well then, we'll get going, said Hannah, glancing at her watch. Seems like we're interrupting. Jungkook gave a light smile. Thanks for stopping by. But when his eyes shifted to Mona, they turned cold again. No greeting, no small talk. He immediately turned back to Yin. If you get tired later, let me know, okay? Don't push yourself. He picked up their earlier conversation as if the others weren't even there. Yin gave a small nod, her smile soft. Okay, you too. And as if the two women still standing at the door no longer existed, Jungkook and Yin sank back into their warm, gentle conversation, full of care and sincerity. Hannah gave Mona a brief look before gently tugging her arm, signaling it was time to leave. And Mona, though reluctant, finally stepped away. There were no parting words from Jungkook, not even a glance. All that remained was the sight of his back turning further away from her, and a warmth Mona could never reach, because it belonged to Yin alone. After Hannah and Mona closed the door, the room fell into brief silence. Jungkook leaned back on his chair while Yin stood beside him, staring at the door that had just shut. Her hand was slightly clenched, and Jungkook could feel it. Her emotions hadn't fully settled. Gently, Jungkook reached for his wife's hand and softly pulled her back onto his lap. This time, Yin obliged, though she remained quiet. Hey, Jungkook murmured softly, touching her chin and gently tilting her face so she would look at him. Look at me, hum. Slowly, Yin met his gaze. I don't like her. I don't like the way she spoke to you earlier. The way she talked, like she had something special with you in the past. I know it's not your fault, but I still can't feel at ease. Jungkook nodded slowly, fully understanding. He touched Yin's cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across it. I get it, and you have every right to feel uncomfortable. But you also need to know, I'm not some fool who can't tell the difference between a woman who's trying to ruin my marriage and a harmless memory from the past. And you know who's in my future. Jungkook smiled slightly, then kissed Yin's cheek gently. You. But she was bold. She talked like she was trying to show me that you two had something real back then, Yin said, her voice rising with emotion. And I hated having to act calm, when all I wanted to do was scratch her face. Jungkook chuckled softly, his expression tender despite Yin's anger. If you really did scratch her face, I wouldn't be mad, he said lightly. But it'd be a waste. Your hands are way too beautiful to touch things that don't matter. Yin lowered her gaze, her cheeks blushing, but she still wasn't fully reassured. Are you sure, Jungkook? Sure. She won't try anything? It's obvious she's not the type to give up easily. Jungkook nodded, this time more firmly. I know, and because I know, I won't give her the chance. I won't let you feel jealous or worried every time you come to campus. He pulled her closer. Yin gave a small nod. I'm just scared. She looks like someone who'd do anything to get what she wants. And I'm not something to be owned just because of ambition, Jungkook cut in firmly. I'm not some trophy to be taken from someone else's hands. I'm your husband, Yin, and the only person who gets to have control over me is you. For the first time in a while, Yin smiled faintly. She rested her head against Jungkook's chest, hearing the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, which helped calm hers. "Thank you for making me feel chosen every single day," she whispered. Jungkook responded by kissing the top of her head. For a moment, the outside world disappeared. No Mona, no campus gossip, just the two of them, husband and wife, comforting each other, strengthening each other, and loving each other. As lunchtime came to an end, Yin stood up. "I have to get back to class." Jungkook looked at her for a moment, then got up too, helping to fix her hair. "What just happened? Don't let it weigh on you. You have me, and I only have you." Yin nodded. With a calmer heart, she stepped out of the room. And Jungkook, he stared at the door that had just closed, then sat back down with a small smile on his face. 3 days had passed since the incident in Jungkook's office. Although everything seemed calm on the surface, Yin couldn't shake off the discomfort she felt knowing that Mona was now officially part of the campus environment. And today, her worries came true. "Good morning," a firm, slightly high-pitched voice rang from the front of the classroom. Yin, who had been jotting something down in her notebook, immediately looked up, and when her eyes landed on the woman in a beige formal suit and high heels, her heart instantly tightened. Mona, the woman walked into the classroom with a professional smile, though the air around her reeked of superiority. "I'm Kim Mona. Starting today, I'll be taking over Professor Lee's class for strategic business analysis," she announced in a loud, commanding tone. "I hope we can work well together. And just so you know, I'm not the kind of professor who can be fooled by a smile or a pretty face." A few students chuckled at that, but not Yin. She already knew this class was not going to be fine. Mona opened the attendance sheet, scanned the names quickly, then placed it on the desk and walked slowly to the front of the class. "Before we begin, I'd like to see how well you understand SWOT analysis, especially in the context of multinational companies facing global market shifts." She called on several students to answer. Some gave solid responses, while others just mumbled guesses. Until eventually, Mona stopped in front of Yin's desk. Her eyes were sharp. There was a small smile on her lips, but it wasn't genuine. It was a smile with intent. "What's your name?" she asked casually. Yin exhaled softly. "Park Yin, miss." "Park Yin." Mona repeated the name with deliberate emphasis. Yin met her gaze, firm and composed. "Yes, miss." Explain how Porter's 5 forces can be applied to competitive strategy analysis in the e-commerce industry, and give a relevant example in the context of the Southeast Asian market. The class fell silent. Students glanced at each other. It was not a light question. Even those who had read the module 3 times might struggle to answer. Yin stayed silent. She tried to recall the concept, tried to organize her answer, but her mind went blank. Mona's smile widened, and when Yin didn't respond immediately, Mona raised an eyebrow and said coldly, Students these days, too busy thinking about how to dress up, look pretty, update social media, or maybe come to campus just to look for a boyfriend instead of gaining knowledge." Some students audibly gasped. A few held their breath. The jab was clearly aimed at Yin, but Yin didn't flinch. She kept her gaze on Mona unshaken, even though her heart was pounding. Finally, Yin spoke. Her voice was calm, but loud enough for the entire class to hear. "Excuse me, miss. If the question is truly meant to test a student's academic ability, I'll try my best to answer. But if it's just meant to belittle and humiliate, I don't think that's the kind of professional teaching that belongs in this campus." The class stirred. Some lowered their heads, some smiled in support, and others looked at Mona with discomfort. Mona looked taken aback, but quickly straightened her posture. "Very well. I guess we'll have to study harder this semester. Let's move on," she said, turning to write on the board. Yin lowered her gaze, picked up her notebook, though her heart was still racing. She knew in her gut, this wasn't over, not when Mona would keep showing up in her class. Throughout the lecture, the atmosphere was tense, like an invisible Cold War. Mona paced back and forth at the front, explaining strategy concepts with a commanding voice. But now and then, her eyes would shift, directly toward Yin. Not a casual glance, not the look of a professor to a student, but a cold, personal stare. A look meant to assert dominance. A look that made Yin feel silently judged. And it didn't happen just once or twice. Every time Yin tried to focus on taking notes, avoiding eye contact, Mona would seek her eyes out. When Yin tried to reread her module, Mona would stand right in front of her, as if monitoring her closely. Is she really trying to start a war with me in this classroom? Yin thought to herself, unrest growing inside. Her fists clenched atop her desk, but her face remained calm. She wasn't about to give Mona the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, Everything was spiraling. Her breath was uneven, her chest tight, and her head full of frustration barely held in check. Finally, the lecture ended. Yin stayed in her seat. Normally, if she didn't bring lunch, she would go to the cafeteria with Yuju. Then, her best friend approached. Yin, aren't you coming to the cafeteria? Yin gave a faint smile. No, I brought my own lunch, though in truth, it was just an excuse. She had no appetite at all. Yuju eventually left for the cafeteria, along with the rest of their classmates. The room grew quiet, and only a few students lingered. Yin exhaled slowly, trying to steady her breath, but it was useless. She was truly restless now. She needed an escape. She needed a comforting hug. She needed someone who could make it all feel a little lighter. She needed Jungkook. Her palms were slightly sweaty as she approached. She slowed her steps when she reached her husband's office door. The door wasn't fully closed. It was slightly ajar, and at that moment, she heard a voice she instantly recognized. Mona's voice. It sounded casual, almost playful, but with a flirtatious undertone that made Yin's chest tighten. I never imagined we'd end up working at the same place like this, Jungkook. Back then, you were always the one helping me. Now, who knows, maybe it's my turn to help you. Her tone was teasing, clearly laced with suggestion despite the lightness of her words. Yin stood frozen in front of the door, holding her breath. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a rising mix of anger and disappointment. She leaned in slightly, trying to hear more clearly through the gap, but Jungkook's response shattered it all. I still don't get it. His voice was firm, unmistakable. Why did you tell Yin that we used to be so close? We were never that close, Mona. You know that. Inside the room, Mona stood still, visibly nervous, though still trying to maintain her smile. Jungkook, have you forgotten? She said softly. During college, who sat beside you the most? Who did you always help with tough assignments? Everyone knew. I was the closest one to you. Jungkook let out a short, sarcastic laugh. He leaned back in his chair, eyes cold as they locked onto her. Everyone? That's what you think. What I remember is, every time we worked on assignments, it was never just the two of us. Minju, Hannah, or Yoonwoo were always there. Sure, I helped you, but the same way I helped them. So please, stop exaggerating your role in my life. Mona fell silent for a moment, then replied defensively, because that's the truth, Jungkook. I was the one closest to you back then. Jungkook stared at her sharply. You were someone I helped often, Mona, but you weren't the only one. Don't exaggerate something that was never there. But we worked on assignments together all the time. Mona protested, her voice rising with emotion. We were never alone. Jungkook cut her off coldly. There was always someone else. At the very least, Hannah or Yoonwoo. Don't rewrite the past. Mona lowered her head, holding her breath, but suddenly, tears began to fall, and her voice trembled as she spoke again. I left the country carrying a wound, Jungkook. I thought I could forget you, but I couldn't. You were the only one I ever hoped would look back at me after all these years. And now, you've married Yin, that girl. Why her? She's not good enough for you. Her words made Jungkook freeze for a moment. You're saying Yin's not worthy? His voice was low but piercing. Who are you to judge that? Yes, there's an age gap between us, but her family is just as respectable as mine. She's never made me angry. She made me fall in love in her own way, without throwing herself at me or forcing me to accept her feelings. Jungkook let out a deep sigh, then looked at Mona with clear disappointment in his eyes. If it were Yin, she would never show up at a married man's office, using tears and cheap flirtation. Do you know why I love her? Because she has dignity. She knows her boundaries. She's never made me feel cheap. Mona sobbed harder, but Jungkook didn't waver. He remained where he was, his stance cold and resolute. You're crying now? Why? Want me to hug you? Want me to comfort you? Jungkook asked sarcastically. Sorry, that's not going to happen. I'm not that kind of man. And do you know why? Because I have a wife, because I have dignity, and because I'm not a jerk. Mona cried with her head lowered, but she still tried to hold on. Why do you keep bringing up her? I'm the one standing in front of you right now, Jungkook. Look at me, just for a moment. No, Jungkook replied firmly. That would be inappropriate. A married man shouldn't look at another woman that way. And I'm not some weak man who can be swayed easily. If you think I'll turn my back on my wife because of a few tears, you're completely mistaken. With everything you've done today, you've only proven that you're not the kind of woman I want. And if my parents knew I was getting close to someone who chases after a married man, crying and begging to be accepted, they would never give their blessing. You're not the kind of wife I want, and definitely not the kind of daughter-in-law they would accept. He pointed toward the door. Stop, Mona. Stop all of this. Don't bother me again. From every angle. You're not my type. And the more you hope for something impossible, the more you're going to hurt yourself. Mona could only look at Jungkook with wounded eyes, but he showed no sympathy, unmoved by her faint sobs, now meaningless in that room. Outside the door, Yin closed her eyes, holding back emotional tears. The storm in her heart was finally replaced by a wave of relief and pride. Her husband truly cared about her. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from all the pent-up fury. Jungkook's voice echoed again from inside, firmer now, leaving no room for mercy. Can you leave now? Jungkook asked Mona again. There was a pause, silence for a moment, broken only by the faint sound of someone's restrained breathing, someone trying not to cry. But Mona still didn't leave. Yin remained behind the wall, just a few steps from the office door that was slightly ajar. Her heart was pounding, not from anxiety, but from the growing discomfort tightening in her chest. She held her breath, listening intently to every word spoken inside. If you still have any respect for me, leave, now. Jungkook's voice was heavy and firm, leaving no room for argument. But Yin didn't hear any footsteps. What she heard instead was Mona's voice, no longer pleading, but cold and sharp. So this is your final decision? Mona's voice had changed. Then let me be honest too. Do you really think your relationship with Yin will stay safe in the shadows of secrecy? Yin held her breath outside. This campus is full of eyes and ears, Mona continued. If I open my mouth, everyone will know that a young lecturer secretly married his student. Are you ready for that scandal, Jungkook? Silence. Several seconds passed before a faint chuckle echoed from the room, a sound that sent shivers down Yin's spine. It was Jungkook's voice. Oh, so now you're threatening me? Jungkook's voice was laced with sarcasm. How amusing, truly amusing. I'm just stating facts. You think I didn't consider all the risks before I married Yin? Jungkook's tone sharpened. If I were afraid of scandal, I would never have tied myself to a student, Mona. But I'm not afraid, because what I did isn't dirty. We're legally married. His voice was calm, but brimming with confidence. Besides, you forget, we've been neighbors for years. I've known her since she was a child. Yin isn't just some random student I met on campus and suddenly fell in love with. We knew each other long before I became a lecturer and she became a student here. Mona fell silent, but she wasn't ready to back down. Not everyone will see it that way. Let them talk, Jungkook replied calmly. I don't need validation from people who don't even know what's really going on in my life. Mona went quiet again, but only briefly. I didn't think you'd change this much, Jungkook. Yes, I've changed, Jungkook answered coldly. I've grown, from a single man to someone who now has a wife. Did you really think I'd stay the same? I used to respect you as a friend. I thought you were kind, but now you're trying to ruin my marriage. Do you expect me to still be kind to you? Do you think I'd be that knave? A small clinking sound followed. Perhaps Mona had dropped something, but Yin didn't care. She remained by the door, her breathing growing heavier as she tried to hold back her anger at the shameless woman inside. Then I can change too, Mona said emotionally. Don't blame me later, Jungkook. And without waiting for a reply, Mona stormed toward the door, only to freeze in shock when she saw Yin standing there, arms crossed. This time Yin was smirking. If I were you, I'd still have a little shame and dignity. You were already rejected once, but here you are, crawling back to a man who now has a wife. Pathetic and disgraceful. Mona's face flushed red, but without saying another word, she quickly walked away. Yin immediately walked in to approach her husband, who now looked calm, sitting on his chair. Jungkook, I'm sure she won't stay quiet after this. Jungkook nodded. Not just her, I won't stay quiet either. Yin furrowed her brows. What do you mean, Jungkook? Instead of answering, Jungkook stood up and walked over to her, taking her hand gently. Let's go to the dean's office right now. I'm going to explain our relationship in person. Yin's eyes widened. You're serious, Jungkook? Jungkook nodded slowly. Yes, I'm sure, more than sure. We didn't commit any wrongdoing with this marriage. I didn't get a student pregnant or harass anyone, or do anything illegal. I simply married my childhood neighbor, with the full support of both our families, and I believe the dean will respond wisely to our situation. Are you ready, baby? Yin smiled and nodded. As long as you're by my side, I'm ready. And with that, they walked out together, heading to the dean's office. The next day, that morning, the campus was suddenly abuzz, not because of a big event or an important guest visit, but due to an unusual sight in the faculty parking area. A quiet and soft-spoken student had just stepped out of a luxury car, driven by a young professor. Yin and Jungkook. Students' eyes widened in shock. Some nudged their friends while others rushed to open their phone cameras, trying to capture the rare moment. But there was no scandal, no cheap drama, because before the rumors could spiral out of control, the two had already taken the first step. Yesterday afternoon, Yin and Jungkook went together to meet the dean of the business faculty. Calmly and responsibly, they explained the reality of their relationship: a legal marriage, registered with the state, no ethical violations, no academic misconduct within the university. And most importantly, their relationship did not interfere with the academic system or compromise their integrity as student and professor. The dean simply smiled, impressed by their courage to take responsibility. And just like that, all the concerns about secrets and potential scandal vanished. Word of their marriage spread quickly across campus, but instead of wild gossip, what followed was admiration. Because the truth was finally out, their relationship was clean. Meanwhile, inside her office, Mona sat rigidly in front of her laptop. Her eyes stared blankly at the screen, her hands clenched tightly on the table. Her cheeks tightened as her jaw tensed, trying to hold back her emotions. She hadn't had the chance to execute her plan yet. She hadn't had the chance to spread the truth she had been holding as a threat. But Jungkook had acted faster and smarter. Calmly, he had exposed their marriage himself. And now, not only was there no mockery, but everyone was praising their courage. The sound of the door opening snapped her back to reality. Hannah entered with a cheerful face, holding 2 cups of coffee and a wide smile. I saw the news about Jungkook and Yin spreading. Wow, they are awesome. Jungkook is really a gentleman, handling everything without any drama. Mona pretended to smile. Yeah, he's amazing. Hannah sat down across from Mona, sipping her coffee before speaking with raised eyebrows. I had told him from the start, their marriage is legal. As long as there's no story about Yin getting pregnant first and it turns out Jungkook, her professor, is the one responsible, that would be a scandal. But there's no room for anyone to gossip. Mona only responded with a brief grunt. Hannah continued, but yeah, it makes sense. They might have kept it a secret because Yin wasn't ready for the campus pressure or gossip. But oh my god, after seeing how Jungkook protected her, I'm even more convinced. He's totally in love with his wife. But in the middle of her excitement, Hannah suddenly went silent. Her eyes studied Mona's expression, which was changing. Her gaze was sharp, uneasy, and bitter. Mona? Hannah squinted. You don't seem happy hearing all this? Mona turned slowly. Because I'm not happy. Hannah widened her eyes. Wait, you still can't get over Jungkook? Mona didn't answer, but her gaze spoke for her. Eventually, she nodded slightly. I can't, Hannah. I haven't been able to. Since then, until now, I still can't. Hannah was stunned. Are you serious? Mona stared blankly. When I found out Jungkook married her, I was crushed, but I still hoped. That's why I took the replacement lecturer position here. I thought, maybe I could get close again. Maybe he'd realize that the one who's right for him is me, not her. Hannah shook her head slowly, disappointed. Mona, you can't be like this. Don't you realize you're hurting another woman? You know Yin is his legitimate wife. She's done nothing wrong, but you just can't move on from the past. Mona lowered her head, but her tone was still defensive. I just want the happiness that should have been mine. By hurting others? Do you think love is only about you? Mona fell silent. Hannah stood up, letting out a long sigh. Sorry, Mona, I can't support you. I'm a woman too, and I really understand how Yin must feel right now. She looked at Mona with pity, but also determination. At first, I thought you took the job here because you actually needed it. If you still have a heart, you should leave. Find a place that will help you heal, not keep torturing yourself here. Because as long as you stay on this campus, you'll keep hurting watching those two together. Without waiting for Mona's reaction, Hannah turned and walked out of the room, leaving Mona alone. For a moment, the room felt empty. No sounds, no defense, no hope. Mona leaned back, her body sagging, her head lowered, and a single tear fell onto the wooden table in front of her. For the first time, she admitted her defeat. Then, with trembling hands, she opened a new document on her laptop. The title, Resignation Letter. Her hands started typing, word by word, because there was no point in her staying here anymore. Her mission had failed, and her heart had been completely defeated.